Whether you're picking and grinning or just grinning, grab a drink, pull up a seat. It's time for Roots Music Rambler. Turn it up. Welcome to the fucking show. Jason sounds handsome.
Jason sounds more handsome. Oh, Lord, help me.
Fun. So I don't know why we do this, and I don't like the fact that we do this so often, because I feel like a TMZ reporter when we continue to talk about Jason Isbell, but the dude keeps stepping in it, and our audience likes him, and we like him, and so we got to talk about him sometimes. There's a new...
It's kind of like one of the big ones, you know, in the whole genre, right? Like, we can't not talk about him, kind of like Tyler Childers. We talk about him a lot, too.
Yeah, I mean, if Tyler or Dwight Yoakam or somebody like that were getting in trouble all the time, we'd talk about them more. But Isbell can't steer clear of controversy, apparently. And this latest one is really kind of thick. So definitely worth talking about. It was just a couple of weeks ago when we're recording this. By the time this airs, it'll be probably old news. But he was on Jimmy Kimmel late last year, and he was talking about the song When We Were Close, which he wrote about Justin Townes Earle, who obviously passed away of an accidental overdose a few years ago. And at one point, as I understand it, they were really good friends. And then at one point they weren't, because from what I saw an old interview where Isbell explained it as Justin got mad because Jason hired an ex of his to be like a roadie or something. And Justin thought that was a loyalty dig. And so they came not friends. And then I think at one point, maybe Amanda Shires and Justin Townes Earle dated. It was obviously before Jason and Amanda got married. I don't know. It's just a crazy
They were
cluster.
Connected somehow, yeah.
So When We Were Close was Jason Isbell's, sort of tribute to his friend Justin Townes Earle. And it's a very deep, sad, emotional song, as you would expect from Jason talking about a friend who has passed away. But there's a verse in the song that says, "I saw a picture of you laughing with your child, and I hope she will remember how you smiled. But she probably wasn't old enough the night somebody sold you stuff that left you on the bathroom tiles." Now, that's pretty thick and pretty serious. And as Jason does, he writes emotionally thick things. The problem is that Justin Townes Earle's widow sat down with her daughter and listened to that song when it first came out on Weather Vanes. And apparently the daughter, hearing that, as one would expect, lost it and has been emotionally, I guess, tormented with those lyrics. And so the controversy is that on the Jimmy Kimmel show, Jason Isbell came out and, explained something about that song. He said, let's see, the song was one of those where I had to say how many victims if I tell the truth, how many victims if I don't, and then you make that choice. So what he's saying there is that line probably was going to hurt her feelings. It was probably going to upset her, but speaking the truth about the gravity of doing drugs and putting yourself at risk there when you have a family maybe helps a lot of other people. And so he's balancing that. Well, Jenn Marie Earle now has spoken out about it and basically has said, in essence, she said, it's time to share her feelings on the song. I'm reading this quote from Whiskey Riff, which I think she posted on her Facebook post. So this is directly from her. It's just reported through somewhere else. I'm not looking directly at the Facebook post, but it says, being the said victims he is speaking of, I felt that in response, it is time to share my feelings on this song, the impact it had on us, and why we had such a strong, visceral, and extremely painful reaction to it, as that has continued now almost a year later since its last release. So she talked about the verse, and then she said that she went on, I'll just summarize. She went on to say that she's reached out to Jason Isbell, who has not responded. And her daughter is like extremely, tormented at this. She called it grotesque, graphic details that were unnecessary and that were not released to the public. And she says the details were incorrect. So it's not his truth to share, being completely removed from the situation for years up to Justin's death. So that's a lot to take in. And so I'm wondering what your reaction to all that is.
Well, I'm pretty neutral because, Jason's an artist and he has every right to record the music that comes from his heart and his experience. And that's something that he's always done. And at one point he and JTE were tight, so he has real experience to draw from. And as far as JTE's widow, I can't imagine what it must feel like. I think from what I understand, just from reading, of course, I'm so far removed from the entire situation, from just reading her response and then like all the social media comments in her favor and then in Jason Isbell's favor, it's not easy to make a stance, right?
Right.
And nor do I really have the right to do that.
Yeah.
But I can understand why she would be upset. Like she said, why did he have to go out on Jimmy Kimmel and perform that song?
Right.
Like he has a whole new album with 10 or however many other songs to choose from, like why did he have to perform that song? And then there was another comment that she made, like one of his shows, like that was the first song that he played, like he opened the show with that. But then, like, from my understanding, the daughter, Justin Townes Earle's daughter, is quite young. She might be like 6 or 7. So a lot of people have raised the question, how does a child that young understand what those lyrics mean if an adult isn't explaining them to her?
Yeah.
And so that's why a lot of people are like, they don't believe the sincerity of his widow. And a lot of people have accused her of doing this for attention because Jason Isbell is so big and respected. So, it's a mess. And I've heard the song and I know that the sentiment that I got from it the first time I heard it was Jason saying, well, shit, I was a drug addict. I was a piece of shit for a long time. How come you had to die and I'm the one that got to live? Like, why wasn't it me? And that's what I took from it. And that was it. I didn't think twice about it. And again, I've mentioned this before, Weather Vanes is not my favorite album of his. I probably haven't listened to it since it was first released in its entirety. So like, I don't feel a connection in any way to the song, but it's, whenever there's a piece of art like this, there's going to be controversy.
Sure. Well, and I look at it on the surface first, because on the surface, it is how people are responding to the art. And I think Jason Isbell has every right to write his songs and his lyrics and speak his truth.
Right.
And I think he is speaking his truth from his perspective of losing a friend. And obviously, as you mentioned, sort of questioning why you versus me, et cetera. The fact that he pulled Justin Townes Earle's daughter into the lyrics is a little risky, but at the same time, it's underlying the emotion and the frustration that he has in that moment. And so I would defend his right to write the lyrics the way he wants to write them. But I also recognize that that's got to be super painful for Justin Townes Earle's widow and daughter. And I think Jason needs to recognize that, whether it's, publicly or not. I think personally, he needs to call her and talk to her and they need to have a conversation. Yeah. And I hope they do at some point.
And I imagine he had to run it past her, or maybe it would have been the right thing to do to run it past her before.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think artists are not going to do that. I don't think artists do that. I think it's like, no, not really. I'm write my song.
The type of person I am, I'd be like, well, let me check because I don't want to offend anybody. And then, you started off your response to what I said by saying that, people respond to a piece of art. Yeah. And it's like, I tell my students, one of the beauties of art, whether it's visual or music or whatever, is that it is open to interpretation. Yep. And we all can take away something different, but it doesn't mean that any one of us is wrong.
Right. That's true. Well, and I hope, obviously, I always hope in these situations, as I said when we were talking about Isbell and Amanda Shires getting divorced, I hope they find peace with this and figure it out. I don't really worry too much or read too much into the ulterior motives behind why she said what she said and all that kind of stuff. I just hope that the two of them can talk, and maybe he can even talk to the daughter and they can come to some sort of mutual peace with all this thing. It's a beautiful song. It's a sad song. It's a heavy song, but I think if you are not personally connected to the story, it delivers a hell of a point and emotion, and I think it's going to stand up against time because it's very personal, and those are always the ones that people connect with. So I definitely don't want to censor anyone in this, but I also hope that from an interpersonal perspective, they come to peace with this, because I certainly would hate to see this just be something that is a thorn in everybody's side for the rest of their lives. That would suck. So,
amen.
Welcome to Roots Music Rambler. We're going to cheer it up a little bit now. She's Frank.
He's Falls.
and we are doing what we always do. We're rambling through the stories behind the music we love. Today on the show, we've got a dandy for you. John Horton is with us. Not only was he the guitarist for the Bottle Rockets, which is one of the pioneering bands of alt country, but he has since joined Sunvolt, which, as you probably know, is led by Jay Farrar, and also one of the pioneering bands of the genre. So we're in for a treat today. So, Francesca, tell us how in the hell we wound up with John on the show.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so as you're reading that, like I have the chills. Okay, because I'm sure everyone knows by now what Sunvolt and Jay Farrar means to me, and then the Bottle Rockets. But anyway, so okay, nerd Facebook music groups, right? We talked about this before, and so you know what? Let's give a plug to the "I'm Going to Where There's No Depression" group, because that's probably the best Facebook music group in existence. Okay. I've met some wonderful people through that group. I've got some awesome new friends because of it. And there you go. There's the plug. So, as you know, I was planning a trip to New Orleans, which has come and gone now. So, before the trip, because I'm still a travel planner and, traveler at heart. So, I reached out to the No Depression group and asked for recommendations of places to stop along the route because we drove down to New Orleans. So going from Chicago to New Orleans and then back. I had an idea of where I wanted to stop, but I've never been to any of those places. So, there's probably a lot that I don't know about. So a bunch of people responded and gave great information. And there was one comment from John Horton talking about stopping in Memphis to go to, I can't remember if it was Sun or Stax, but it was one of those in Memphis. And I'm like, cool. And then I responded, said thanks. And then I looked at the name like later. I was reading through it again and I looked at the name and I did one of these, like a double take. And then I looked at it again and then I looked at his profile picture. I'm like, oh, it is the John Horton. So I sent a private message to one of the moderators of the group. And I'm like, who was also a huge Sunvolt fan. And I'm like, his name's Bryce. So sup, Bryce. So I'm like, Bryce, is that the John Horton? And he's like, I have no idea. So he went and checked it out. He's like, hell yeah, it is. And I just sent him a friend request.
There you go.
And I said, well, I'm going to do the same. So I did. And, then we just started chatting. I sent him a message and said, hey, we'd love to have you on the podcast. And he was like, he was all in from, the very beginning. And yeah, he was just so enthusiastic about it and accessible and gracious. And, he plays in my favorite band in the world. Like, I don't know if I'm relaying this enough, right? Like people picking up what I'm dropping here. So this is a huge deal.
Yeah. Yeah, and the interview was a lot of fun, and I'm glad that I had only really come into appreciating both the Bottle Rockets and Sunvolt in the last couple of years, because I think if I had been as enthusiastic about talking to John as Francesca, we never would have gotten anything out of either one of us. So we were kind of celebrity starstruck there while we were doing this call. But you're right. I mean, he's just so enthusiastic and fun and had some good stories to tell. And I walked away from this. You guys are going to get a treat. Well, you probably won't get as big of a treat out of this as I did, but I got a huge treat because we started geeking out on Dwight Yoakam, and he hadn't heard several of Dwight's newer records. So Jason Falls, the host of this show, who's nobody, recommended music to the guitarist for Sunvolt and the Bottle Rockets. So there.
So, yes, it was just, it was a win all around.
Yeah, this was a really, really fun conversation, and I'm super excited to have John on the show. So before we get to that, though, we need to know a little bit more about this trip because, and obviously, John made a reference or a recommendation of where you should go, but I know because you kept me up to date and I followed you along on your Instagrams and stuff that you kind of made this the focus of your trip seemed to be like this whole St. Louis, alt country birth. It's like the Mesopotamia of alt country right there in the St. Louis, Southern Illinois area. So tell us about it.
Pretty much. So yeah, that was one of the reasons I agreed to drive down to New Orleans. When I was first thinking about the trip, I was figuring, we'd just fly. But so, yeah, I agreed to drive. And then I said, if I'm going to drive that far, I'm stopping wherever I want,
Yeah.
So I'd always wanted to make the sort of pilgrimage that I did. And it just never worked out, like timing or, my travel companions. It just never worked out. And I even reference it in the interview with John. I dragged my mom to St. Genevieve, which is part of the song Tear Stained Eye on Trace by Sunvolt. Okay. So like this pilgrimage has been a long time in the making. So also through the No Depression Facebook group, I hooked up with a lovely woman named Robin Wheeler, she's actually written a book about Woody Guthrie.
Oh,
So,
nice.
Maybe we can talk to her another time and she can give us more information about it. I don't want to say anything wrong about her work, but so she lives in Belleville, Illinois, which is where Jeff Tweedy is from. And Jay Farrar, well, I found out that Jay Farrar actually is from the next town over, which is called Millstadt. But, it's much smaller than Belleville, so it's easier to just say Belleville. So, yeah, I hooked up with Robin. She showed me around Belleville, saw the house where Jeff Tweedy grew up. I saw the bookstore that Jay Farrar's mom used to own and that he worked in for a time, their high school, like just the coolest stuff. And of course, I'm driving and I'm like, oh my gosh, like totally fangirling, stopping to take stupid pictures. And Belleville, the town itself, it was more than I would have ever expected. I expected it to be much smaller, but it's kind of a sprawling, there's several tens of thousands of people that live there.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. And I've always had a soft spot for St. Louis, and Belleville is considered like the St. Louis metro area.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm not supposed to like St. Louis because I'm from Chicago, Cubs, Cardinals, that's the thing. A lot of Chicagoans really do look down their nose at St. Louis, and I never understood it. So I've always loved the town, and to experience like that part of it, Belleville, and to see where, my music idol kind of got his start it was just the best. Then the day after we were in Belleville, before hitting the road and continuing the rest of the way to New Orleans, I stopped in New Madrid, Missouri.
Yep.
Because there's a Uncle Tupelo song, New Madrid, about Dr. Browning, who predicted there was going to be this giant earthquake and everybody was going to die and blah, blah, blah. And there's a lyric in the song where the river turns and then runs backwards. And so there's a bend in the Mississippi River right there at New Madrid. So I had to stop there and take the pictures, this and that. And it was super windy, but it was well worth it. And yeah.
So here's my question, my reaction to all that now that you've told me, kind of one-to-one here rather than me seeing it on your Facebook stories or Instagram stories and all the other places you posted. In an instance where someone takes a road trip to visit birthplaces and high schools and bookstores and whatnot of their musical idols, and those places aren't museums, does that make you a psychopath?
That's a bit extra. Psychopath, no. Like, I'd even been okay with stalker.
Okay, So that's okay. That's close.
Well, they don't live there anymore. Who am I stalking? I mean,
well, yeah, but if you, how do you know you couldn't drive up to Jeff Tweedy's house and his mom sitting on the porch going, "Who the fuck are you?"
But okay, my point is, if I wanted to stalk Jeff Tweedy, it'd be a lot easier to do it here because he lives in Chicago. No, I'm not a psychopath. I'm not a stalker. I am an enthusiast.
Okay. All right. Well, I wouldn't have put those labels on you. I just wanted to ask the question somewhat rhetorically. Yeah. And also because it's funny. There you go. Oh, my goodness. We're sipping on a bourbon and I'm out. And we want to talk to John here from Sunvolt and the Bottle Rocket. So we're going to take a quick break for a refill. Take a moment, if you will, and listen to more about the awesome sponsors that help make this show happen. As you know, one of them is Musk Ox Flannels. They're buttery, soft, and built like a tank, just like me. They make you look good, make you feel good. Yeah. Handsome. Musk Ox Flannels. Go to gomuskox.com/Rambler. And use the code Rambler, and you're going to get a discount off those buttery soft, built like a tank flannels. We love us some muskox around. Yeah. And they also give, they donate 10% of every purchase over $100 to preserving the muskoxes up there in somewhere in the Great White North. So
Alaska.
they do good for the earth while they're putting really good feeling stuff on your belly and your back and your shoulders and stuff. Sexy flannels. We love pushing the sexy flannels here on the Roots Music Ramblers. When we come back, one of the truly influential artists of the alt country world, John Horton from Sun Volt and the Bottle Rockets, joins us. Don't go away. This is Roots Music Rambler. Hey, gang, I was not a flannel guy until I found muskox flannels. Now, I don't want to wear anything else. Well, I mean, pants, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so muskox is a premium flannel shirt that comes in various colors and styles, but also all season or heavy. So they have different weights and thicknesses. They even have sizes that fit big boys like me. Now, Frank, I hear the ladies like the flannel look. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. So one muskox flannels customer actually said they are buttery soft, but built like a tank. I resemble that remark, especially when I'm wearing my muskox flannels. They also, by the way, give $10 of every $100 order to support wildlife conservation. So you're doing some good for the earth and the animals on it with every purchase. Visit gomuskox.com/Rambler, browse the collection and get you some buttery soft, built like a tank premium flannels. Make sure you use the code Rambler, all caps, and get the discount on your order. That's gomuskox.com/Rambler. Use the code Rambler, buttery soft, yo. That might be my new hashtag. Welcome back to Roots Music Rambler. We are tickled, honored, and all sorts of other things to have John Horton with us today. He is a multi-instrumentalist, probably mostly referred to as a guitarist, currently with Sun Volt, one of our favorite bands, formerly of the Bottle Rockets, one of our other favorite bands. So it's safe to say, John, you're probably one of our favorite guitarists of all time because we love all of your music. So welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Good to be here. Excited.
That's quite the resume to be with Sun Volt and the Bottle Rockets as far as in terms of defining, I think, what we now know as alt country or roots rock bands. Tell us a little bit about that journey. What has being involved with those two, really benchmark bands in the category meant for you professionally or personally?
I don't really know how to answer that question. I mean, the bands are such a product of this around here, that it's just kind of in the water, really. But I love being in the Bottle Rockets. I love being in Sun Volt. I don't know. I really don't. I think I learned a lot of things in Bottle Rockets. I learned how to play loud and aggressively, which I kind of, not to that level was able to do. When I joined the band, I had been playing really like as much like James Burton as I could with this guy named Mike Ireland, whom I don't know if you remember or not. He had a band called the Starkweathers.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
I think they were based out of Kansas City, and they would come to St. Louis a lot. I really loved them. Mike's a great songwriter, and I always liked him. But I got a chance to play with him, and I did. But it was really very country music. Like it was like backing up a singer and really trying to do like James Burton or Roy Nichols, kind of guitar playing, backing up guitar playing. And so joining the Bottle Rockets, I sort of had to learn how to play loud, really loud.
Can you turn it to 11?
That's pretty easy to do
Right.
now.
Right.
Yeah, but the bands, they're such a product of around St. Louis. It's sort of hard to, like, I don't really, like, I may not have a perspective because it's just people from the block essentially.
it's what you know. So I'm curious, is there a way to put, we've never really heard, it's the St. Louis sound, or there you get that from, the Pacific Northwest or the Mississippi, the Gulf, the coast, the Delta, you get that geographic sound, but for some reason whether it's the Bottle Rockets or whether it's Sunvolt or whether it's, Wilco or whether it's prior to that, Uncle Tupelo, there is a geographic connection with those core alt country benchmarks. Is there something about
I think
the
it's
people or the place there that,
it's upstream from Memphis and down the road from Chicago, and Kansas City is about the same distance away, and Nashville is about the same distance away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of right in the middle there. So it's not too hard to,
Crossroads.
of sorts, it's pretty easy to find music, like whatever you like, you can go find it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't discount the FM rock radio stations around here, which one was pretty nationally groundbreaking. KC95, like they were one of the first FM rock radio stations, and they pretty much did their own thing up until probably the late 90s, or I'm sorry, late 80s, mid 80s, late 80s. It was a pretty independent programming, or I should say fairly independent. It got homogenous, in the I forget what it was in like 96. It was in the Clinton administration. They sort of, what the hell is that thing called?
Deregulation.
Yeah. It was interesting until about then. There's also another really great one around here called WMRY. And they were over in Illinois, over on the Illinois side. That was an interesting one. That was a FM rock radio station where you could hear like Ian Dury and the Blockheads and deep cut Bob Welch, Fleetwood Mac, Roxy Music. That was a fun radio station while it lasted.
Yeah, I bet that did have a lot to do with it.
And then there's the punk rock thing has always been persistent and small but mighty. And I think especially for Jay and Jeff, punk rock was a big thing for a while. The KWMU, the A public radio station around there, they used to have really great music programming, and I remember they had a really great music program called Pipeline that you could that was like new wave stuff at the time, and then you could hear like Flipper and Black Flag and Psychedelic Furs, and it was a really cool music program. It used to be cooler. It's still around, but KWMU used to be a lot more fun than they are now.
Well, I mentioned that I started listening to the Bottle Rockets and Sunvolt around the same time, like mid to late 90s. I just found that, both bands and the genre, however you categorize it. And so you mentioned St. Louis and, Jay and Jeff and other names. And while both, like, we could talk about the Bottle Rockets and Sunvolt, they definitely have some similarities, but it seems like the perspectives and perhaps the philosophies of both bands are a little bit different.
One thing we all, myself included, we're all from small towns around St. Louis. We're not actually from St. Louis. This is the big city that you went to for fun, to see shows,
right,
to go record shopping, to buy musical instruments. We came to St. Louis, but I'm from Washington, Missouri, which is it's on the Missouri River, but about the same distance away, as like Festus. It's about a 40-minute, 35-minute drive, Yeah.
Good old Festus, Missouri.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask, from what place what perspective or philosophy did the music of the Bottle Rockets come from?
Definitely. I've always, for people who never had heard the band, I always described the band as 1/3 John Prine, 1/3 Cheap Trick, and 1/3 Neil Young and Crazy Horse.
Nice.
Okay, I can see that for sure.
That will solidly get you in kind of Bottle Rocket territory.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. Oh, that's really good. And then, sadly, we know that the band broke up in 2021. Well, broke up. I shouldn't say that because that sounds a little has more of a negative connotation.
It had run its course.
Just Bottle Rockets.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I was personally devastated. I eventually came to terms with it, though. How did you and the other band members and I know that was a weird time, right? Like, we were still kind of in the middle of the pandemic. So what was it like for you guys at that time?
It was weird. Are you talking about the breakup of the band or just the time?
Well, the breakup of the band, but I think And well, I'll let you answer, but I wouldn't be surprised to know that the time itself, because of the pandemic, had a little
It had a
something to
lot
do
to
with
do
it.
with it, I think.
Yeah.
Brian had been kind of checking out for a while. I think he had been kind of ready to be done for a while. And I think
Yeah.
the pandemic was kind of a good stopping point, I think. And it was really, in hindsight, it was kind of the cruise, that last cruise that we were on it was sort of like the,
Was it
yeah,
the Outlaw Country
yeah,
Cruise?
it was kind of
Okay.
like going on vacation to see if you still wanted to be married, kind of like end of the relation, end of the right, not quite wanting to get divorced, and seeing it's a
Kind of like Temptation
well, kind
Island.
of, yeah, it's just like going on vacation, and it's like, well, are you still gonna do this, or and yeah,
And that was it, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. I've been on one of those vacations before, unfortunately,
yeah.
but yeah, they all tend to turn out the same way, which is obviously disappointing. But that's the great thing about music is if you want to hear the Bottle Rockets, you can still hear the Bottle Rockets. Maybe you can't see them play live, but
Yeah,
by
it
golly,
is.
your music's there and it's
It's
fantastic.
it's a catalog to be proud of. I will say it is.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, let's step out and take a break here. We want to go to break with a little Bottle Rockets music just to kind of give us a little flavor of what we're talking about for those who maybe haven't heard the band. If you haven't heard the band, what rock you've been living under?
For real.
But anyway, let's go to break with Building Chryslers by the Bottle Rockets. It features John Horton on guitar. Don't go away. This is Roots Music Rambler.
Don't care how they turn out. Thinks being union means he's here to stay. He's building Chryslers, trying not to burn out, doing airbag installations all day. He got the fast load, he got the new house, he got the wife and the kid on the way. He's building Chryslers.
Hey, Ramblers, I have experienced a revolution in sound in my house, and you can too. The revolution is driven by Sonos. The Sonos wireless music system lets you play any song in any room, control it all with the Sonos app on your phone or tablet. Sonos has all the connections to give you millions of songs and stations, including connecting to your iTunes, your Spotify, Pandora, and more. Get a wireless Sonos player and hear the sound quality difference. Then get one for all the rooms in your house where you listen, but might be out of reach of the stereo or Bluetooth speaker you normally use. So I've got one in my bedroom and bathroom for when I get ready in the morning. I've got one in the kitchen and living room for when I'm hanging out with friends. And then down here in the office den for when I'm working or setting up for another episode of the show. I happen to like the Sonos Move, which is one of the speaker models. I can put it out on my patio for cookouts. It's a weather-resistant design, has an 11-hour battery life, so I don't need to plug it in out there when I have people over for cookouts or tailgates or whatever. And I can play music on all or just a few of the speakers, so I never lose my jams going from room to room. Try the Move and hear the difference, then hook up all the rooms in your house for an excellent listening experience while you move around cleaning or dancing or whatever you do in the privacy of your own home. Listen to Roots Music Rambler on it, for God's sakes. It makes me sound even more handsome. Go to rootsmusic.link/Sonos, S-O-N-O-S, rootsmusic.link/Sonos. That'll take you right to the Sonos Move speaker page to purchase. I highly recommend it, and you'll love how much better your music and podcasts sound. Go to rootsmusic.link/Sonos. That's rootsmusic.link/Sonos. Roots Music Rambler. We're sitting in with John Horton from both Sun Volt and the Bottle Rockets. You were just listening to Better Than Broken by the Bottle Rockets. And of course, John, a big part of that band for a long time, and that band a big part of defining the alt country category. So, John, let's go back to the beginning. When did music become a thing for you? When did you discover it? How did you discover it? And when did you know this is something you wanted to do?
My mom and her family, solidly, I would say my mom and her family, my mom's small but mighty record collection. And then at family get-togethers, her younger brothers, my Uncle Tim and my Uncle Steve would, they could play and sing, and they would show up and, play, sing songs. And yeah, it was pretty compelling. My Uncle Steve actually was a professional musician for a while. He played bass in an R&B duo from St. Louis called Mel and Tim. He can totally do that kind of melodic Muscle Shoals, James Jamerson bass playing thing. He's a fantastic bass player. He's a pretty good singer. He traveled the world with Mel and Tim. They had a couple gold hits in the 70s. So,
Wow.
Hanging around those guys, my Uncle Tim and my Uncle Steve as a kid. Honestly, on my mom's side of the family, it's her mom, the Weirs is their last name. And it was at a family reunion. I was looking around and kind of thinking about it. I was like, God damn, everybody plays a little bit. And then there's like a handful of like professional musicians. Like one of my mom's cousin's sons is a guy named Will Blades, who's a organ player, but he runs with like Medeski, Martin and Wood and Galactic. I think he plays with the drummer from Galactic quite a bit. His name is escaping me. And then and then one of her other cousin's daughter's daughter, Ashley Lusk, is she plays and sings. She was just recently on went out. Well, I guess it's been a while. It's been a few years. She went and did like the American Idol thing.
I was gonna say that name
She's
sounds familiar.
I think she was on American Idol.
Okay, not that I watch it. I'm just saying the name sounds familiar.
Guilty pleasure.
Yeah, it's fun to watch sometimes. The voice is kind of that's my guilty contest, contest show pleasure.
Sure.
So when did you start playing, and then when did you start playing more professionally?
I guess I was in high school. I started kind of late. I was in junior or sophomore, somewhere around there. And then professionally, I guess, probably not until 1999, 2000, around there, really. Spent a lot of time kicking around St. Louis. I spent a little time living in Nashville. Yeah.
All right. And then we talked a little bit already about St. Louis and the sound that comes out of there. And I think the way that you described it was perfect, being upriver from Memphis and then, ways down from Chicago. And I think that's great. But we often hear about places like Memphis, Nashville, the Delta. But to me, like St. Louis with names like Chuck Berry and Miles Davis.
All right. Here's the deal with St. Louis. Okay. It has a really hard time. So this area is really rich with tradition and artists, but the place has a really hard time celebrating all of that. I mean, it's the place has a much easier time celebrating baseball than they do Chuck Berry or Miles Davis or Michael McDonald, who's from Ferguson. It has a much easier time doing that than a lot of times. I think the music exists despite the place,
okay,
rather than because of the place.
Wow,
that I can certainly understand that, and I will tell you, I'm a native Chicagoan, lived in Chicago my whole life, and I've been to St. Louis. I don't know how many times. A lot of those trips were for baseball, but before that. It was for, my little brother played ice hockey, so we would go down there a lot for tournaments and whatnot.
Okay.
But my dad always made it a point on any trips that we went on, we always had to do something like educational. So he took us around and showed us St. Louis and the history, right? Like you said, there's a lot of history there too. I mean, the gateway to the West. And because I'm from Chicago, I know how people from Chicago tend to look down on St. Louis. And I was always one of those people who like stood up for the city. I'm like, hold on a second. No, I don't want to be there in the middle of July, but
Yeah, it's not
it's a
right, but
great
yeah,
place to visit. And
it
I
is.
remember
It is.
when part of the reason I started Roots Music Rambler, and talk about the pandemic killing things, but I started Roots Music Rambler first in 2019. Part of it was because I wanted to go on a trip that kind of traced, and this is where I'm going to fangirl, kind of traced, Jay Farrar, Sun Volt, and like the songs that he wrote. Like I dragged my mom to St. Genevieve, Missouri, because I had to see the town because of the song Tear Stained Eye. And, that trip is what kind of prompted me. I mean, it was many years later to start the blog and the podcast. So for me, it's a special place. That's where my favorite music has come out of.
I love St. Genevieve. That little town is a gem.
It is.
It's an historical gem. It really is.
It really is. I enjoyed it. My mom still talks about it. She's like, remember that little town? I'm like, yes, mother, I remember. So yeah, to see a show like at Blueberry Hill would be like, if I had a bucket list, it would be at the top. I've only seen the outside. I have a picture of it, and that's as close as I got.
Oh, well, you
So
should come to, you need to make a road trip to
I
Blueberry
know.
Hill.
I know. Actually, I'm going to be
My,
driving down that way next week when I start driving to New Orleans. So yeah, I am going to stop in Belleville, Illinois.
Belleville's cool too. It's kind of there was a huge, huge influx of German immigrants around in Missouri and over like Illinois
Mm-hmm.
and basically down the Mississippi River and down the Missouri River. And their influence is huge around here. It really is. I mean, all the beer barons around here were all,
Right.
that's who they were. And then they brought their bohemian friends who really knew how to make beer. So there's a yeah.
So speaking of Belleville, now, okay, you said you're from Washington, Missouri.
Yeah.
So were you around that scene, like, in the Uncle Tupelo days, or did
I
you
mean,
arrive in town like later on?
right when that was happening, I
Okay.
arrived in town right when that was happening. I mean, in Washington, there was nothing. I mean, we had to make any kind of music scene, and I still have some friends that I'm still friends with a lot of people from Washington. A few of my still play music with, but it's farther away from St. Louis than Belleville. Belleville is just pretty much right across the river
Yeah.
from St. Louis. I mean, you can be there in like 20 minutes.
Right.
Washington, you got to hike down I-44 a little bit
Okay.
and then cut up no, then you sort of tack north up to the Missouri River.
You don't have to turn on the gravel road, do you?
No.
That's
So
good.
we mentioned
Yeah.
Festus, which is where Brian's from. So how did you get connected?
So I've been in a few bands with Jay's brother Dade for a really long time. I've known his brother Dade longer than I've known Jay.
Okay.
And Dade is awesome. Dade's an awesome musician. I think we're playing next weekend. I can't remember. I have
With
to go.
Colonel Ford?
No, yeah, with Colonel Ford, yeah. Yeah, Dave's awesome. But so Brian and Mark started up Diesel Island initially with Dade as the bass player,
Okay.
but then Dade quit, and then they got me to play bass in Diesel Island, and then that's how I joined the Bottle Rockets. First was playing bass in Diesel Island.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine like being in the midst of all of that, during the Uncle Tupelo days in the beginning of Bottle Rockets. And I know Brian worked with Uncle Tupelo,
Yeah,
so
it was a different, it was different around here than like I think there's been a little sea change around St. Louis in terms of quantity and quality of musician style of music. In the 90s it was kind of tough, it was still like I remember like the Red Hot Chili Peppers were super important to a lot of people around here, and that was not my speed at all.
Okay.
And sometimes it was, I don't know, it felt a little lonely sometimes. It felt lonely being a fan of Dwight Yoakam and starting to dig through, like Ray Price's catalog, which is what I was doing.
Okay. And you mentioned Dwight Yoakam, and now you and Jason are best friends.
Yeah. Dwight was born in the same little small town I'm from.
Oh, really?
And so like I've always loved Dwight just because he's a homie. So yeah,
he was the gateway drug.
Yeah.
He really was. I mean, there was a little, like, my friends from Washington played a huge influence on my musical taste. Because when I started hanging around them, I was like the hard rock dude. It was Led Zeppelin and Rush, the Police. They were all much hipper than me. That they were into REM, and they knew about Pylon and like Jonathan Richman and Velvet Underground and all this stuff. But we sort of latched on to like older country stuff, especially Johnny Cash. I remember we got to go see Johnny Cash one time before his like second leg of the, before his like kind of, he had this sort of renaissance, and that was pretty amazing. I will never forget it. He had the Carter sisters were with him as well, which I had no, I mean, they were amazing, but I didn't really know who they were at the time.
Okay.
I feel very fortunate that I got to see them.
Yeah.
It was really cool. Yeah. But when I discovered Dwight Yoakam, and really it was Pete Anderson, like it's Pete Anderson's guitar playing and production, was like, man, God, this stuff sounds so fucking great. And who's playing, what's all that guitar? All those great guitar. Yeah, I love Pete. Yeah, I still love Pete Anderson. I love his playing. Loved his playing. It was influential.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I've gotten to the point now, especially with the evolution of music with, alt country and all of the sounds that you guys have helped define over the years. I like Dwight's newer stuff almost as much as I like his old stuff, because he's gone into that cow punk kind of sound, and it's just really rocking stuff.
I need to listen to it. I haven't. I've been remiss in like kind of. I sort of have the same relationship with Dwight Yoakam that I do with Rush, which is I just sort of left off after a while. And I need to revisit Dwight's newer stuff.
Well, to give you a flavor, I think I started really getting back into Dwight around the time Blame the Vein came out, and then Three Pairs came out, which I love that album. It's fantastic. But Secondhand Heart it's from 2015-ish. It's got 5 or 6 songs on it that are just like bangers. Like they could be rock and roll songs. They could be punk songs. They could be country songs. I love them. So good stuff.
What's the name of the album?
Secondhand Heart.
Secondhand Heart. Okay. All right.
There you go. All right. Okay. Now we're going to take a break so that I can gloat a little bit that I just recommended music to the guitar player for Sunvolt and the Bottle Rockets, because that's never going to happen again. And since we've been talking about, since we've been talking about all these place names, though, I'm also going to go to break with my favorite Bottle Rocket song, which is Indianapolis. Turn it up. This is Roots Music Rambler. That's good.
Got a tow from a guy named Joe. Cost $60. Hope I don't run out of dough. Told me about a sex offense, put him 3 days in jail. Stopped in Indianapolis. Hope I live to tell the tale.
is What About Tomorrow from Sun Volt's Day of the Doug, which is probably one of my favorite recent albums. I got that, picked it up a couple months ago and have worn that out already on the old turntable. We are here with John Horton, who is the guitar player, multi-instrumentalist for Sun Volt. He's one of the members of the groundbreaking group, the Bottle Rockets. He's here with us today on Roots Music Rambler. And so, John, let's dive into Sun Volt just a little bit.
Sure.
It's 2021. You've been asked to join Sun Volt. What's going through your mind there? Was that kind of like out of the left field, or was it something you kind of thought might happen?
I honestly didn't know. I didn't really think it would happen. I mean, I've been sort of hanging around, hanging out with Jay a little bit just for fun, socially for fun. Jay and his wife Monica were on the cruise, and my wife Lisa came with me, and Lisa and Monica hit it off really well and became fast friends. And we just had fun. It was just fun. That cruise was fun. It was. It was a lot of. It was nice. So that was kind of a friendship born first, and just sort of hanging out, and occasionally we would hang out during the lockdown, just to sort of get away. No, I didn't really expect it. It was, I'm still pretty chuffed to be in the band.
And I was pretty excited to hear the news. And when I first heard Day of the Doug, I listened to it a couple of times, and I kept thinking to myself, man, it just sounds like they are having so much fun, and maybe because it's the attitude of Doug Sahm that was seeping into your playing. And then when I saw you guys live, it was last August when you guys played up at Space in Evanston.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I was like, I have never seen Jay so it seemed like he was so relaxed. And even through the recording on the album, it sounds like he was just having a good time. So was I right about that?
Oh, yeah. That album was, it was an easy, recording is sometimes tedious and work,
Right.
but that album was easy and fun to make. It really was.
Yeah.
Mostly live, there's a few overdubs, but yeah, it was an easy thing.
It really is one of my favorites too. Like Jason said, one of, of the newer releases the last year or so. So when I saw you guys last August, and that was just a great tour, right? The Day of the Doug, and then playing Trace from top to bottom. Because Trace to me was like, that to me is like the defining album of my life. Okay. I'm going to try not to get emotional, but
it's such a great album. It really is.
It really is. And I get into conversations a lot with people about this because Trace, of course, there's no denying its genius, but I would argue that Straightaways is right up there with it.
No, I think you're right.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I think I'm right too. But anyway, so I have to share this with you. So after seeing you guys, I think that was the first time I saw Sun Volt with you in the band. And I remember talking about it afterwards. I'm like, I thought you added just this whole other layer to the band. Like the sound, you guys sounded fantastic.
Nice.
I've seen Sun Volt a lot. So I read something that described you as hot shit, phase shifted country folk pickin'. What do you make of that?
That's fair.
Fair. Okay.
That's nice. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I would agree with that based on that performance, but I was reading that and I was just laughing. I'm like, I gotta ask him about this.
Wow. Wow, that's nice. Nobody's ever called me a hot shit. Okay.
You'll take it. Well, you know what, folks? You heard it here first. John Horton is hot shit.
Yep.
I won't turn it down.
We've declared it officially on Roots Music Rambler. Somebody put this entry in Wikipedia. John Horton is hot shit.
Oh my goodness.
Man, I'm pleased that somebody noticed the phase shifter. I love I love guitar modulation effects, and I really love. It's sort of like I have a little crusade to sort of normalize the phaser, but by normalize I mean but like my reference point for the sound is more like I don't know if anybody is a Thin Lizzy fan.
Mm-hmm.
So on Live and Dangerous, I don't know who it is, but somebody, either Scott Gorham or Brian Robertson, there's almost always a phaser on. And it's cool because it sort of allows for the guitar parts to be differentiated a little bit more than they might be. It's such a great sound too. It's real chewy, and I just love it. I don't know. I'm like I'm more trying to do that than like the Waylon phase shifter. I'm really much less trying to do Waylon phase shifting and more like Keith Richards, Some Girls phasing.
Nice. Well, I'll have to send you that article where I read that.
Okay.
So you
Yeah.
can keep it. You can bookmark it, and if
All
anyone
right.
ever says anything, you'll be like, "Look, it says it right here. I'm hot shit." Okay. So I have to ask because I just have to. What is Jay Farrar like behind the scenes? You know, he comes off as very much an introvert. Now, I've met Jay a couple of times over the years. Very, very limited and quick interactions. And, you know, he's very reserved on stage, not a whole lot of banter. But so you said you guys were on that cruise together and it was so much fun. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, Jay does have fun. All right, cool. So what I gotta know, what's he like?
He's actually like can be one of the funniest people that I know. Not funny like a clown funny, but like like really funny.
Yeah.
Dry. Really dry kind of sense of humor.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's not surprising at all.
Very
All right,
nice.
that's
No,
awesome.
he's actually a lot of fun to hang around with.
One would
Excellent.
think. One would think.
Yeah.
Well, and we also have to ask, I'm not sure if you're able to share anything, but what's next or what's on the horizon for either John Horton or Sunvolt?
I don't. Sunvolt is not really doing much this year. I don't think. I mean, really, it's just a handful of some festivals and like concert series kinds of things. I don't. We won't be as busy this year as we were last year.
Very good.
I know you guys are playing Bourbon and Beyond, Jason.
Yeah, you're coming to
Yeah.
Louisville.
Yep, we'll be there for that.
I love it.
I keep busy around town with music. I teach at School of Rock. I have a Beatles cover band that I really love playing in.
Nice.
It's super fun. It's sort of like the Beatles world too. It's like we pull from like related stuff like Traveling Wilburys and Wings and George Harrison solo stuff. It's a lot
Nice.
of fun. And then playing with Colonel Ford, and sometimes I play with Diesel Island.
Oh, okay.
Try to keep busy.
Very good.
Looking for other projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll float that out there. Hey, need a guitarist?
We got hot shit for you.
Yeah. I think I'll have time.
Okay. Well, good deal. John, we really appreciate your time. This has been
This was fun.
Obviously a huge thrill for Francesca. It's been a pretty big thrill for me too to have you on the show. I've loved your music for a long time, so this has been good. Appreciate your time. We'll make sure that people have links to all your stuff in the show notes. We're going to close this out though with Sometimes You've Got to Stop Chasing Rainbows. This is
nice.
Sunvolt and John Horton from Day of the Doug, and this is Roots Music Rambler.
This morning I seem to have it all together. Gonna leave LA in the morning sun. Going back home where I can think things over. Find out what in the world is going on. Sometimes you've got to stop chasing rainbows or tailing Haley's comet across the sky. Sometimes you've got to stop chasing rainbows.
Welcome back to Roots Music Rambler. How about that, folks? John Horton from Sunvolt and the Bottle Rockets, two of my favorite alt country bands, certainly, and two of my favorite bands overall, too. And I know Francesca, it was hard for her to contain herself during the interview, and I'm sure she's still super excited about it. So good talk. Good to have him on the show.
Absolutely. I don't know what else to say.
I was just going to pause awkwardly and see if you didn't squeal a little bit. So there you go.
No, I think I've fangirled enough. Moving on.
Yeah, that's good. Well, it's good. It's great to have, members of our favorite bands on the show. It's what it's all about. We love talking about, new music, which we're going to talk about in just a second, but we also love, digging into the histories and whatnot of the personalities behind the bands we love, and having somebody from Sunvolt on. We've had somebody from Sunvolt and the Bottle Rockets. We've had somebody from the Drive-By Truckers. We're doing pretty well. We just got to keep going after them. So good stuff. All right. It's time for our Picking the Grinning segment. This is where Frank and I talk about the artists that we pick who are making us grin. It's kind of our music recommendations for you. It might be new music, new artists, new albums, might be old music, but it'll all sure be good. And I am going to again preserve Francesca's sanity for a moment so she can fan herself from the heat from John Horton being on the show. And I'm going to go first on the Picking the Grinning this week. And so I want to tell you about an artist that I've discovered recently. And I'll tell you a little story behind how I discovered her too. Her name is Savannah Keyes, and it's spelled Keyes. So it looks like keys, but I think it's pronounced Savannah Keyes. She's a singer-songwriter in Nashville. Now, I want to preempt this by telling you, when you go and listen to her music, the stuff that she's got on Spotify, a lot of it's going to sound like pop country radio stuff. That's what she writes for. She writes music for Music Row, and that's what she's been, basically writing for quite some time. But I would challenge you to do this with any pop country song. Listen to the lyrics, pay attention to the lyrics, and listen to the stories that she's telling, because her songs are really good. She's got a fantastic voice. I could see her being the next, like, Carrie Underwood, if you will, right? I could see her being a pop country star, but I could also see her taking a turn toward acoustic alt country stuff and, coming up that way, like a Britt Taylor, who wrote for several years on Music Row, and then decided, I'm going to go back to my roots here and do more bluegrass and stuff. And now she started to chart on the alt country charts and Americana charts and whatnot. So Savannah Keyes, and if you recognize the name, and you may, she hosted a show on Radio Disney for a while. She was also on one of American Song Contest, maybe, and on NBC. And then she also was on Streets of Dreams on CNBC. So if you're a fan of those reality, music shows, she was on a couple of the smaller versions of those. So she's a known person, and she's been writing on Music Row in Nashville for a while. And I was recently introduced to her music, and she's on Spotify. We'll put links in the show notes so you can hear her. But I was recently introduced to her by a friend of mine from college who is essentially her godmother. She, my friend Holly, and Savannah's mom are like besties. And apparently I know Savannah's mom too, because we all went to Morehead State University as undergrads.
Oh, wow.
I don't remember her mother, but she was a cheerleader there, so I'm sure I would recognize her.
Yeah.
Because I worked in the athletic department at the time. And it's not the last, I didn't stalk cheerleaders, people. Calm down. I worked in the athletic department, and the cheerleading practice room was right next to my offices. So I saw all the cheerleaders all the time. Anyway, so at any rate, Savannah Keyes, Keyes, is my Picking the Grinning this week, because I've been digging into her music. Again, you're going to hear it and say, oh, this is like pop country radio. This is, mainstream stuff. Yeah. That's what it sounds like. But listen to the songs, read through the lyrics. She's got a fantastic voice too. I think she's got big star potential. I just think she's looking for a break. And if she gets it, she's going to be somebody that maybe we told you about her first. So that's my pick this week.
All right.
What about you, Frank?
Yeah, I'll definitely give her a listen. So my Picking the Grinning is not a new artist or band. Okay. Someone that I think a lot of our listeners will already be familiar with. But I used my drive to and from New Orleans as a time to not only finish like 3 audiobooks, but also to dive into new music. Because when I went to New Orleans, it was like so much new music had just come out. So I was saving it for the ride. And one of those releases is the album Mind, Man, Medicine by the Secret Sisters. So the Secret Sisters, I have adored for more than a decade. And my sister and I both have, we've been huge fans for a long time. And I think part of the reason I liked them so much is because the two of them, Laura and Lydia, remind me a lot of my sister and me. I'm Francesca. She's Felicia. Okay. So, we've got that going. The two sisters with names starting with the same letter. And my sister and I always used to sing together. My sister has a far superior voice than I do. So I was always like in the background, like whispering harmonies or whatever. But, it just like reminded me like, oh, look at these two sisters. They're so cute and they're singing together. Oh, so my sister and I went to see them a bunch of times. And in the beginning, when we would go see them, we had a chance to talk to them or, at first meet them and then talk to them after the shows. So the first time we met them, because they are from Muscle Shoals.
Oh,
so
nice.
The first time we met them, the first thing I said to them was, so you're from Muscle Shoals. Do you know Jason Isbell? And they're like, yeah. And I think, gosh, I'm probably going to get these details wrong because it was a while ago, but one of the sisters owned the house that he used to live in. Okay. So maybe I made that up. Maybe I got the details wrong. But anyway, and so then every time we saw them after that, we talked to them. They maybe didn't remember our names, but they remembered my sister and me. Yeah. And they were like, oh, hey, so it was, we felt really cool. Nice. In fact, one of the last times that we saw them and got to talk to them, and I never remember which sister is which, like who's Lydia and who's Laura. And I feel badly because there are people in my family who still don't know which one of us is Francesca and which of the other is Felicia. So, but anyway, one of them was pregnant, right? She was talking about that. And then after the show, when we talked to the gals, the other sister kind of confided in my sister and then, I guess indirectly to me as well, that she was also pregnant, but it wasn't public yet.
Oh, wow. So
Felicia and I were like, oh my God, they told us first, and we were so excited. But aside from that, we have always loved their music and their harmonies, and like, I always have a soft spot for them too, because I think if I were a better singer and maybe if I'd worked harder on learning guitar and stuff, that my sister and I could have become like the Secret Sisters. But, I have loved them forever. And this new album is outstanding. I loved it. And their harmonies are killer. Like they literally will melt your face. And, it's just beautiful. They make some of the most beautiful music in existence.
That's outstanding. Well, if it'll make anybody feel any better, the only musician-esque that I've ever thought I could be like or would be Jack Black. So Tenacious D is all I got. So that's about all I could muster.
Peaches.
Yeah. And anyway, all right, that's going to wrap it up. Go out and check all the links in the show notes. You can get to all the John Horton stuff. You can get to Savannah Kai's. You can get to the Secret Sisters and all the other stuff we mentioned today. But we certainly enjoy the fact that you're here listening to the old Roots Music Rambler. Please do share it with a friend. Roots Music Rambler is a production of Falls and Partners, copyright 2024. Our theme music is Sheepskin and Beeswax by Gentacorum. Join us online at rootsmusicrambler.com and make sure you mash that subscribe or follow button so you remember to join us for the next Hoedown and Throwdown. She's Frank.
He's Falls.
And whatever you do, kids, ramble on.